on Thursday, and known affectionately as Dodomayana. Rufai earned 65 caps for Nigeria and played at the 1994 and 1998 FIFA World Cups. He was also a key member of the Super Eagles squad that won the 1994 Africa Cup of Nations in Tunisia. Rufai died in Lagos, prompting tributes from the NFF and football fans, stakeholders, journalists across the country. He played for several local clubs before his successful career abroad in Benin, of course, Belgium, the Netherlands, Portugal, Spain. The NFF described the passing as a shock loss for Nigerian football. Let's take a look at the stats and, of course, the facts of Peter Rufai, goalkeeper, former goalkeeper of Nigeria. Yes, silver medalist in 1984 and 1988, gold medalist in 1994. That's talking about the Africa Cup of Nations. He played at the 1994 and 1998 FIFA World Cups, and of course, is one goalkeeper who a lot of persons said, I mean, growing up, that he inspired them while watching the Super Eagles of Nigeria. But joining us this afternoon to look at the legacy of late Peter Rufai is the program's manager of Wazobia FM Port Harcourt, China Cheru, joins us this afternoon. Good afternoon to you, China. Thank you very much for joining.
Good afternoon, Favor.
China Cheru, we thought we had, we had gotten the sad news from Diogo Jota's death, and later on in the evening we got the news of Peter Rufai. I mean, it came as a rude shock to many who kept saying they didn't know he was not feeling fine or he was sick. But we're looking at what he has done. I mean, if Nigerian football and the legacy, you watched him play, and also post-football footballing career. Can he take us through? I mean, this news, of course, is sad, but of course, take us through a memorable moment from Peter Rufai during his heydays.
Well, if you live in Port Harcourt like I do, and if you lived in Port Harcourt in the 70s and 80s, you'd have heard of a young footballer in Form 3 at what you call JS3 today. JSS3 was Form 3 back in those days, who had just signed for the local club Sharks. You can imagine a GS3 player signing for a first division club in the league these days, or an MPFL club. That was he. His name was Peter Jaja from Opobo. And we got to watch Peter Jaja's career, and he was good. He played a few games for Sharks. He played a lot of games for Sharks. And he signed for Sharks at the same time that the Ghanaian goalkeeper, Raymond Kwakopom, was at Sharks. So it was difficult for him, but he excelled. And after Sharks, he moved to Stores. Therefore, was in Port Harcourt, and then the internet was not, there was no internet at that time. We heard about the name change from Peter Jaja to Peter Rufai. But he was still our person. We still knew him as a Port Harcourt boy. After playing for Stores, he moved to Benin Republic to play for Dragons. And for us, he had his first cap for the Super Eagles in 1982, but was not at the AFCON that year, because the two goalkeepers Nigeria took to the AFCON that year was Best Ogedegbe and Peter Fregene. But by 84, he was a mainstay in the team. He and Patrick Okala were two goalkeepers in the team from 84. And from that point, his career continued to go up. Got the silver for Nigeria in 84, got the silver for Nigeria in 88, was now the AFCON in 90 and 92, returned in 94 to win the AFCON, was at the World Cup in 94 and again in 98. It was not a good World Cup in 98 because Rufai had basically, at the end of the season, he was holidaying when we had the goalkeeping crisis. And he was called up from holiday to join the team. And for those of us that watched World Cup in 98, it wasn't a good World Cup for him. But regardless of, his, should I say, poor World Cup in 98, it takes nothing away from the fact that he was our first choice keeper for a long time. For 110 years, was our first choice keeper. And he had great moments. One that comes to mind was the game between Nigeria and Bulgaria at the World Cup in 1994. Yes, Nigeria won 3-0, but there are lots of saves Peter Rufai made in that game, Dodomayana made in that game, that maybe Bulgaria could have had an equalizer after 1-0, but he kept us in the game for loads of times. Even the AFCON team of 1994, if you remember that final against Zambia, after we had gone 2 goals up and Zambia had pulled one back, the Zambians peppered Nigeria. They bombarded our 18-yard box, they bombarded our goal area for an equalizer. If not for Rufai in goal, we probably would have considered an equalizer. Again, the AFCON semi-final in 1994 against Cote d'Ivoire. That game ended 2-2. Again, Rufai's heroics are called to question, and he really answered those questions. So Rufai, you can before the exploit of Vincent in Europe, a lot of people will clearly say, especially from my generation, will clearly say, of the goalkeepers we watched, that was our number one. You know, of course, the older ones, you talk about Emmanuel Okala, you talk about Inu Adigogo of the 60s and early 70s. But a lot of people will say Peter Rufai. He's really up there. If you're going to mention Nigeria's top 5 goalkeepers ever, there's no way Peter Rufai will not be in the top 3. No way.
Well, I mean, history has said, I mean, you've given us a bit of what a lot of persons did not know in terms of how he grew up and, you know, how he got to limelight. I remember also while growing up when we want to play sets, I mean, we call it sets and choosing. Whenever you say, identify yourself as a player, you would love to be some. We say Patrick Uboma, Mark Fish. Some will say as a goalkeeper, I want to be, I'll be Peter Rufai, I'm a Peter Rufai. That's to show you how much of, influence he had on the Nigerian youth. But let me come to Ibita now. I mean, China has talked about his history and a lot of things. I mean, if you look at the generations from the late 90s to 2000s, they'll probably tell you Vincent Eyama and the likes. But Peter Rufai really served longer in the national team, and his coordination, to be able to coordinate the defense and his reflexes really stood out for him. But no thanks to the social media, who, I don't think was really active at that time to have propagated, what Rufai did while being at the goalpost.
It speaks volume how great he was. Despite not having the social media era then, I think if you ask any generation, even the next generation, Gen Zs, you ask them 2 goalkeepers they can readily identify in Nigeria that don the green and white, Rufai will be one of them. He was identifiable, and because post-career, it was still being honored. There was something doing here, there was something doing here. Especially when it had to do with youths, Rufai was always invited, so his face was always there. And I mean, that's one way of honoring them. Not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be financially. Always have them remembered, always have people tell their stories. It's their stories like this. I didn't know it started from Sharks, like China rightfully mentioned. I didn't know. I thought it was stationary stores. That's all I've known all my life, stationary stores. I didn't know it started from Sharks. But stories like this have to be retold and told for its legacy to continue. And of course, if you talk about the national team, there are eras we pick. We say the 80 squad, the 1980 squad that won the first, the 94 squad that won the second, the Olympic squad, maybe slightly, not so much, the 2013 squad. Yeah, it's not as historic as those 3 I mentioned. And of those squad, those players, each player in those squad should be immortalized. And like he was in the national team, it was so good that I called it quits with the national team. And in 98, he had to be recalled. It wasn't his best of outing. 98, if you remember, 98 was terrible. But didn't taint his legacy. And I mean, we should celebrate him rather than mourn. It should be a celebration of life well lived.
All right, China Cheru, I mean, there's this question. I think I asked you this question when you also came on the show during the death of Christian Chukwu. Since then, even though you said, okay, at some point in time, when you look at what can be done to the dead, to celebrate, to honor the dead, especially when he or she has done so well for the country. But if you look at that time till now, I don't think the federal government has done something, maybe immortalized Christian Chukwu so far. Now we're here again talking about Peter Rufai, who of course did a lot for the country. What do you think? I mean, is it that we're not really looking at, doing a lot to honor, persons who have given their services for the country in Nigeria? And if yes, I mean, look at Diogo Jota. We already have what Liverpool wants to do, what different, clubs and countries would love to, how they want to immortalize him and, celebrate what the legacies he or she has done. But in Nigeria, it's not the case. And is it that there's a culture we don't really practice? Or it's just that whenever anything happens about the dead, we just say, okay, let's move on. And what do you think can be done to change this narrative? I know some states have done that in the past. For Kwara State, they renamed some facility after Rashidi Yekini. But it seems we're always asking to do something that is basic, but it's not basic.
You see, listen, it's not about money, like I've been said already. It's not about money. We are not a nation that remembers, sadly. We should be able to tell these stories That's the only way we can immortalize people, to tell the stories. Because, for example, you name a stadium after a person. I tell you, there are lots of Gen Z in Port Harcourt that go to the Adokia Menstimaka Stadium and have no idea who Adokia Menstimaka is. I kid you not. For to them, it's just the name of a stadium. So, have we immortalized, even though he's still alive? What has naming that stadium to him done? So we need to tell these stories. Now, I grew up hearing about Gordon Banks. I didn't watch him play. About his exploits at the 1966 and 1970 World Cup. Because people told those stories. Now, we need to tell stories. That's the only way you can keep the memory of these people alive. There's a Thunder Balogun story I will never stop telling, even though it's not true. How, remember the left, and his left leg took a shot and killed his brother. But it's not true. But I'm going to keep telling that story because my kids enjoy the story. That's how they remember that there was a person like Teslim Balogun more than the stadium built after him in Lagos. So we need to tell the stories. We need to go to schools. We need to let them know that there was a great person. Listen, we hear Diego Maradona, we hear Pelé, we hear people, but why don't we hear about our own? So apart from renaming a structure after him, which is not bad, but how do we tell the Peter Rufai story? Like I talk about him being Peter Jaja. I'm sure a lot of people watching this video now, or when they hear Jaja, they know about King Jaja of Opobo. That's the most popular Jaja they know. They never knew that Peter Rufai was a Jaja. They never knew. So we must keep telling these stories. And that's the best way to immortalize our people. How many people know Samuel Koraji? You don't know about him because of his birth at the National Stadium? No. They know about the stories told about him. So for me, that's the best way. We need to tell the stories of people. And my wife was about to launch a book. Of course, the person before his book was launched. Now, one of the best ways to start immortalizing him is to be part of his book launch. I'm talking Lagos State government, I'm talking River State government, I'm talking about the Lagos State Sports Commission, the Nigeria Football Federation, I'm talking about ex-professionals. They must be part of that book launch because that is one way you can keep his memory alive. So, Favor, listen, we must tell our stories. If we don't tell our stories, these people will not be remembered by their boss at the stadium or an edifice named after them. No, they can only be remembered by those stories that will pass down from generation to generation. Of course, because they are fables, because they are legends. Every time it's told, something is added to it, but that's not the issue. Let us tell the story. That's how we remember these people.
All right. Thank you very much, Aina Cheru. You've been able to give us, in-depth, giving us insight, towards, the life lived by Peter Rufai. I've learned a lot at this moment talking about, the rich history of what he has been able to do.